be offline, in the sense that you will give your quiz in the PLM lab, just like the offline students do. So for this quiz, we are combining now, and that is because you don't have the class. Yeah. So, and the other point that I wanted to mention is your CRs are here. Can the CRs come on board? Bhaskar. Bhaskar, please do one thing. I have only one group component, okay, which is a case presentation. तो मैं आपने जो groups का list दिया था उसको नहीं disturb करना चाहती हूँ. And at the same time, we have offline classes also. So please talk with your classmates and give me a workable solution at the end of the day. Okay. So post it on the group, right? Because I'm running short of classes, running short of time also, and I don't want to waste my time creating more and more groups for presentation. Think you can do that, Bhaskar? Yeah. So now let's start off. Okay. I'm sharing the screen and we'll go ahead. Okay. Now, today what we're going to do is we will start with all the 5 parts of the organization in detail. Okay. So we need to understand each of the parts clearly before we go ahead with design. Okay. So today the first, that is our first role. Now, if you remember in the class preceding this, or in the previous class, I had spoken that every organization is divided into 5 different parts. Okay. Now, so if you look at the 5 parts of the organization, they are apex, the operating core, the middle line, the technostructure, and the support. So today our work is to understand that, what do these parts mean? And what do they do? What are their functions? Why do they exist? Okay. So let's start with the first one, which is also called the head of the organization, right? So when we're looking at the first part or the strategic apex, then that is the top of the organization. That is also the leadership of the organization, right? Now, if you look at the portions in bold on this slide, what is written out here? That the apex is charged with ensuring that the organization serve its mission in an effective way, and also that it addresses the needs of those who control and otherwise have power on the organization. So what are those groups that may have power on the organization? You can have agencies, you can have unions, you definitely have the government, and you also have the pressure groups. Okay. So if you are okay, I mean, what do pressure groups mean? And can you give me an example? Yeah, fast, fast.
Some client can be pressure.
Uh-huh.
Client.
Clients are not pressure groups. Clients are stakeholders. Pressure groups are very different. Sometimes they may have no stake in your organization and yet they are able to pressurize or create a situation for your organization. Yeah.
When political pressure is, will that be political, any kind of those things?
Oh, very often that is represented by the government.
And trade unions.
Unions also do not form pressure groups. Pressure groups, are what should I say? Um, they, how do you look at them? They're not people who have direct stake in your organization. They have direct stake in your organization, okay? Or they are directly associated with your organization, like a client, like a customer, like customer organizations. They have direct stake in your organization. Sometimes pressure groups have no direct stake in your organization, but they control your activities. Okay. Now, for example, if you're looking at the media is considered to be one of the most disruptive pressure groups today. Okay. And they don't you cannot say that they have a direct stake in your organization, but then they're there everywhere, omnipresent, omniscient. omnipotent also. Okay. Now, if you look at NGOs, right? For example, if I'm looking at the Greenpeace movement, they are pressure groups, okay? And they have been associated with million, zillion companies, particularly if you look at the FMCG majors, Greenpeace is a very, very important stakeholder for them, okay? Now, so what I'm trying to say out here is who addresses the needs of all of these stakeholders, such as government, such as customers, such as unions, agencies, and the pressure groups. It is the work of the, it is the responsibility of the strategic apex. So, which brings us to the next, that who would be the members of the strategic apex? So, which is what I've written out here also, that executives, presidents, governing board members, they are the members who populate the strategic apex. And what are the prime duties of the apex? See, the first duty is direct supervision. To the extent that is effective, what does this word mean? That in the ultimate analysis, okay, in the ultimate analysis, whether we are looking at an Apple or a Google or a small startup company or our own university, each member in that organization is accountable to the apex, is accountable to the apex because they represent the leadership. But it is not possible for the apex to directly supervise the activities of hundredfold employees who may be a part of the organization. But still, supervision at the highest, at the topmost level is the first duty of the apex. But I think out of these three duties, the most important is the second, okay? That is management of the organization's boundary conditions. And I had explained what boundary conditions mean in earlier classes. So, what does it mean? Yes.
And the interference of government bodies.
Uh-huh.
The
Yes, Sudhir.
interference and the interference of government bodies in the organization.
Not only interference of government, not interference. What is it?
And when the conditions are put by the other non-members of the company, then the response is given by the members of the company. That is
Very
boundary
good.
condition.
Boundary conditions are external situations which are created by numerous stakeholders. I have given you examples of the stakeholders, and the company will have to respond to this situation. Now, to give you an example of this, the current crisis that is going on in Ukraine, okay? Supposing think that okay, why think? I'll give you an example here, okay? Now, a doctoral scholar of mine is the head of the Asia Pacific operations for human resources at Ericsson. Okay. So she called me some 2 days back to discuss about some course related requirements of the doctoral program. And she said that, ma'am, I am so stressed out now. And the reason being that nearly 700 employees are stuck in Ukraine and Russia in the Ericsson offices there. Is that a boundary condition for Ericsson? Is that a boundary condition for Ericsson? Tell me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. The first is you ensure the survival of the employees who work for you. Okay. And the second is you think of the business operations that you will have or you will continue to have in the near future. So it's a very, very difficult situation now. So supposing I am a company like TCS or Infosys that has hundreds of employees who are working on site in Russia or in Ukraine, is that a boundary condition for me? I have to evacuate them. I have to do something for them. So that is called as a boundary condition. And this can be created by anyone. In the Ukrainian crisis, it's created by the country, the government, okay? The decisions which the ruling powers have taken, right? So my question is, whatever that boundary condition be, somebody will have to respond to it. When hundreds of employees are asking that, what will we do? Where will we go? There has to be some response from the company. Who will respond to this? The response is from the strategic apex because it's the head of the organization. Okay. So that is your second function. The third is, this word apex is preceded by the word strategic. Okay. So, what does it mean? It brings us to the third function. This third function is the development of the organization strategy. Okay. So the strategy of the organization is two words actually. They are not words, they are very important. The first is the vision, and the second is the mission. So, who formulates that? Who decides that? It is the head of the organization. And you should also know that every head in the same organization will bring their own vision and mission to the organization. So, if you are looking at Apple, Apple before and after Steve Jobs is a different organization, right? If you were looking at Infosys, there was Infosys which was guided by the vision of Narayan Murthy, one of the founders. There is the Infosys which exists even after, Narayan Murthy. So Murthy's Infosys was very different to the kind of Infosys that you see today. So that is what I'm saying. Strategy is not something कि एक बार बन गया तो वो रह गया. No, every leader will leave his or her own impact and imprint on the strategy of the organization, whether it is an established organization or whether it is a new organization. That is the reason why the apex is also called the strategic apex. Okay. So please remember the most macro view of the organization. What is the meaning of macro? Macro is whole, okay? It is not a microcosm that you are looking at. You're looking at the entire organization. So when you talk of a macro view, who takes the most macro view of the organization? It is the apex, because the apex is at the top of the organization, right? So what I've done is I have actually put down some examples of boundary conditions which the apex in different companies has responded to. So take a look at that, and that will also give you some idea. Now, these are some examples. Maggie noodles worth $50 million destroyed in India. Apple launches a lawsuit against Samsung in 2011. Pfizer announces the FDA approval to its newest drug, Pro. Pfizer's debacle meaning, disaster with a drug for morning sickness. Apple strikes a deal with Sharp. Sharp is a Japanese company for OLED displays in the iPhones in 2016. This was after it won the lawsuit with Samsung or against Samsung. Now, the worst ever strike at General Electric in 2019. These are all boundary conditions, okay? And these boundary conditions were responded to by their strategic apex, okay? So now let's move on. So if you've understood the apex, which is the head of the organization, so what should we be discussing next? We should discuss the body of the organization. And remember, without the second part, which is what we are coming to, not a single organization exists, because that is the core of the organization. So let's come to that. Now, the second part of the organization is called as the operating core or the body of the organization. Okay, most important part of the organization. So what does it do? Or what do the members in the operating core do? They perform the day-to-day activities of the organization. Day-to-day activities, मतलब ऐसे मत सोचो कि some routine, repetitive kind of things. तो वही है आपका operating core. No, whatever the organization is standing for, whatever business the organization is doing, that activity would have to be performed by the most important part of the organization, which is the operating core. And if someone is to ask you that ye panch part mein, what is the largest part in terms of size? That is the operating core. In terms of size, the largest part of the organization is the operating core, the most important part of the organization, and every organization design will have the operating core. So that is, the crux of the organization, right? So what does the core do? Look at the points which are put. They secure the inputs, they transform the inputs into the outputs, and they distribute the output. So, और बचा क्या है? That is the most important thing. So, they do all of that, right? Now, to give you an example from KIT, because, we are all members of the university. So, for example, if I look at the 5,000 plus faculty members who are providing, what should I say? Day-to-day activities of the organization of teaching, learning, research, academic administration, उनको आप कहाँ रखोगे? People like me, where will you place me?
Operating core.
Operating core.
We are all members of the operating core because there is where we operate. And if the basic business or the basic purpose of the university is education, we are a part of it. So the placement of all faculties in a university will happen within the operating core. Okay, at least faculties को यहीं पे आप place करोगे. Okay, because everything happens through them. Now, if you look at this, they secure the inputs. Inputs, for example, let us say our major inputs, our major stakeholders are the students. So we look at the admissions department, and admissions is a part of the operating core. Where do our roles come? They transform the inputs into the outputs. So the 2 years that you spend here, or the 3 years, or the 4 years, whatever number of time you spend here, the transformation from inputs to outputs is the job of a faculty. Okay, that means what should we do? We should make you placement ready. Then comes distribution of outputs, that is placements. That means as a finished, what should I say, polished student, you are now ready to be taken by the corporate world. Okay, so the placement department, the training and placement department, everything is a part of the operating core. So that shows what is the importance of the operating core in any organization. Okay. So this is called as the second part of the organization. So please remember, it is the largest part of the organization in terms of size. Okay. Now let's move to the third part. And before we go to the third part, it's a question that I want to ask. Now, supposing you have a small organization of 50 people, right? Now here I have the apex. Okay. And here I have the operating core. Okay. And the organization it's a small organization. So there are only 50 people in the organization. So there is a chance that the apex can directly supervise the work of the core. Okay. Directly supervise. But supposing this 50 becomes 500, can that supervision happen? That means people in the apex, some 2, 3, 4, 5, jo bhi hai, they will be able to directly supervise the work of 500 people. Is that possible?
No,
Mm.
Right? So it is impossible. 500 can become 5,000 also. Then in that case, what the organization does is the organization creates another layer, okay? Another layer to connect the apex with the operating core. And that layer is called as the middle line, okay? Which is the third part of the organization. So now let's move on. So let's look at the third part, okay? Now, when we are talking of the third part of the organization, I think you should understand this point that I have put. Middle line is completely dependent on the size of the organization. So, हमेशा ये मत सोचो कि every organization will have a middle line. No. Organizations have a middle line when their size is big. That means the apex cannot directly supervise the work of the core. So they create a third layer in between the apex and the core, which connects the apex to the core. Okay. So that part is called as the middle line. Okay. And the job of the middle line is not very different from the job of the strategic apex. Take a look at it. They handle the flow of information to the unit. They handle the flow of resources to the unit. They also have boundary conditions to manage, and they also formulate the strategy of the unit. Okay. So all of these are the major responsibilities of the middle line. And who can be members of the middle line? You have plant managers, you have vice presidents, you have area sales managers, etc. Okay. Now, if you look at the university, okay, let us say all faculty members are in the operating core. Yeah. When we're looking at the apex, we have the founder, our honorable founder and his office, which is, who form the part of the strategic apex. So we have the founder, we have the vice chancellor, we have, registrars, we have so many other officials who are here in the apex. But the core is almost, if you are looking at teaching and non-teaching, they're almost 10,000. Yeah. 10,000 is a huge number. Okay. It's very difficult for the apex to directly connect with the core. So naturally, there will be the creation of a middle line. Can you take a guess who represents the middle line in the university?
And HODs,
director,
directors, HODs,
Very good.
directors.
That means the directors, deans, not HODs. all schools in KIT are actually headed by functional heads are either directors or deans, and they represent the middle line for us. Okay, that means if we want to get connected to the apex, we do it through our director. Now, इन्हीं चार functions को आप रखो. Okay. So the first is handle of the flow of information to the unit. So if I'm looking at the director, then what is his first job? The first job is that whatever information is coming from the university has to reach every single faculty member, and that happens through him. Then handle the flow of resources to the unit. So if there is a conclave, the conclave will have a budget. So I may put up the budget, but who would approve the budget? Who would secure the resources from the university? Again, our director. Boundary conditions to manage. Boundary conditions to manage meaning supposing, and one of the biggest boundary conditions is created by placements. Okay. Because that is one of the most important jobs. Now, let us say a company is coming to the campus and is leaving without taking a single student. So that is a boundary condition. So who will respond to that? Again, the director. Formulate the strategy of the unit. How many courses to run? What new programs to come? What new courses to be offered? How many students to come? Whether the students will be in a hybrid mode? All of that, in short, is looked at by the functional head of the school, okay, in tandem with the university, right? So these are the prime duties of the middle line. Now, I want to show you some boundary conditions which have been created by the middle line, okay? So let's look at that. That means these have been responded not by the strategic apex exactly, but by the middle line of the organization. Why? Because they were limited to a particular region. See, the difference is that when you are looking at boundary conditions for the apex, it's the entire organization. When you are looking at boundary conditions for the middle line, it is a particular zone. Okay. So IKEA denies drug mark certification in India. So in the Indian subcontinent, this was the stand of IKEA. Project Siksha of Procter and Gamble, again an Indian-run initiative. Distribution of Pampers through UNICEF in Africa. Rebranding and repositioning of Maggie, again in India. Okay, so these had their own, limitations, and they were taken care of by the zonal heads, by the tactical heads of particular regions for these companies. Okay, so these were some boundary conditions for the middle line. So always differentiate between the apex and the middle line. Apex के लिए it is the entire organization. It can be anywhere. But for the middle line, it is the unit or the geographic region or the department that they are in charge of. Okay. Now, if I look at the apex, the middle line, and the operating core, they are the major part of the organization. One go, one line, they are connected to each other. But there are two more parts of the organization which are equally important, but they don't form the major part of the organization. So, what are they? Now, let's move to the fourth part. And that fourth part is called as technostructure. Okay. Now, what do the technostructure, what do people in the technostructure do, and why is the technostructure important? Okay. So if we look at the technostructure, we find the analysts. Okay. I'm just reading out what is there on the slide so that you understand, who serve the organization by affecting the work of others. Okay. What is the meaning of this word? Now, let's decode it. Now, in the previous classes, when we discussed structure, I had spoken tremendously of this word called formalization, right? Formalization is the second structural dimension. And what does it mean? It means standardization, right? Now, have you ever asked yourself a question that who is responsible for standardization within an organization? Don't automatically assume that it is the strategic apex. No, there are a group of people who are responsible for standardization within an organization, and that group is called as technostructure. Okay, that group is called as technostructure. But एक चीज आपको हमेशा याद रखना है that technostructure is not, please remember, is not a part of the operating code, is not a part of the operating code. That is very, very important. Now, who and typically, in Mintzberg's words, Henry Mintzberg, who is the founding father of organization design, he calls these people, these members of the technostructure, as control analysts. Okay, as control analysts. So, what do we have here? We have work study analysts, and he has given examples that who can they be? Work study analysts like industrial engineers who are responsible for process standardization. Then we have planning and control analysts such as planners, schedulers, and accountants who are responsible for output standardization. Then we have personal analysts like trainers and recruiters who are responsible for input standardization. So, input, throughput, and output standardization is all the responsibility of the technostructure. Okay. Now, let's take the example of a software company. Okay. Let us say that, a project team. Okay. Please understand my example. A project team has created a software for one of their major clients who is a retailer. Okay. They've created an inventory management software for their client who is a retailer. Now, before this software goes to the client, it has to be tested, right? And the test is performed by the quality control team. So, from the project team, the software is getting passed to the quality control team. What is the job of the quality control team? It is to test for bugs, it is to see whether the specs of the software are according to the specs which it was supposed to be designed by. It is to see whether the standards of the company are maintained. Everything is in place before the software, goes for a user acceptance test, right? Yehi to kaam hai. Okay, we crudely decode. Now, where will you put the quality control team? Quality control team will be put in the operating core or in the technostructure.
Technostructure.
No, sir.
Got it? So, did you understand the example? So, simply, again, I'm taking another example, ekdam different, but still try and understand, and that we can give from our own university. Now, let us say I am a member of the operating board, but there are certain standards that I will have to adhere when I'm taking a MBA class. Now, the first and the most basic standard, जिसके बारे में हम लोग कभी बात ही नहीं करते, but करना चाहिए, that is the duration of the MBA class. Are you aware that in the university, maximum duration is for the MBA class? Every other class will end either by 60 minutes or by 75 minutes, but the MBA class takes 90 minutes to end. Doctoral classes also take 90 minutes to end. And very often we have debated that whether we can hold the attention of a student for 90 minutes. And there was a time for 2 years or 1 year where we experimented with 75, 60 or 75 minutes ka class, and that was quite a disaster because we increased the number of classes, whereas the attention was the same, meaning 40% of the class will anyways have zero attention. उनका तो आप कुछ कर ही नहीं सकते, right? Instead, so when we're talking of 90 minutes, that is a standard. Okay, that is a standard, that's a benchmark. As a teacher, I cannot say that, oh, today I'm not prepared, तो मैं 60 minutes करके छोड़ दूंगी. Tomorrow I will do something else, I'm over prepared, so 2 घंटा लेके छोड़ दूंगी. I cannot do that. Okay, every class has a learning outcome, and it is left to me to ensure that that outcome is met through the class. Okay, so where these standards are coming from? Where are these standards coming from? There is a department which is showing us the way forward, that if we are to go in this direction, if we are to maintain our status of Institute of Eminence, if we are to maintain all possible accreditations, which are so important to the future of the school, we have to maintain certain standards. So that comes from the technostructure. Okay. And the technostructure is located in one of the most important buildings in the university, which is called as the Chintan. The Chintan has the offices of the Vice Chancellor, the heads of research, the registrar, the controller of examination. Every working head is in the Chintan. So the standards, the benchmarks that come to us come from that office. For example, I'm a doctoral guide. How will a thesis be written by my doctoral scholar? Okay, आपने मन से लिखेगा. Somebody will write a thesis of 100 pages, somebody will write thesis of 600 pages. That means you will have no benchmark. No. Somebody will write 10 chapters, somebody will write 2 chapters, nothing like that. There is a standard which comes. That comes from the university, and that is the technostructure of the university. But what is most important is the techno is not a part of the operating core. Did you understand the role of the techno structure? Everyone, any doubts here? Please ask.
Ma'am, why it is not a part of the operating code? And
It
if the
is
director is not forming any rules or standard rules for the students?
Yes,
oh,
ma'am. The strategic apex should also have a say on this, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you saying that the strategic apex has no say? What did I say in the beginning? That in the ultimate accountability, okay, ultimate accountability as a faculty, who do I have the ultimate accountability to? It is to the strategic apex, okay? But then, what is the job of the, and are you thinking that the technostructure is completely devoid? That means it doesn't coordinate with anyone, but only gives rules. No, it is not like that. Okay. So, for example, let us say that there are a set of rules that come from the university with regard to the MBA program. Are you saying that the director is not a part of that think tank? No, definitely is a part of the think tank, but the set of standards, the set of benchmarks, when they come, they are a discussion between Chintan and the functional head of the school and the involved faculty members. Okay. So now coming to Aliva's question that why techno is not a part of the operating core. Okay. Very often you will find that these lines are blurred. That means techno and operating core are working hand in hand. But in many organizations, they try to separate. Okay. They try to separate these activities. So when I'm looking at a software, let us say ITES organization, okay, and I'm looking at the job of a quality control team, there are 100 projects which are going on in the organization, and those 100 projects, or let us say those 100 teams, will have to touch base with the quality control team because that is the techno structure of the organization that will look at the output standardization, right? Sometimes what people do, okay, in order to not have a central techno structure, they create a quality control team within the project team. तो उनका काम है internal quality standards को आप maintain करोगे, okay, but once again not part of the regular day to day activity. That is clear because this is the fourth arm of the organization. So you will not have this overlapping of responsibilities. So wherever you have overlapping of responsibilities, there would arise a confusion. Okay. So that is the reason why the fourth and the fifth part are kept separate from the operating core. Okay. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, fourth part is responsible for standardization and is not a member of the operating core. Fifth part is called as the support. And typically, students क्या सभी लोग सोचते हैं कि support consists of all clerical people in the organization. And the answer here is a big no. No, it doesn't contain all the clerical people of the organization, but the explanation of support is like this that like techno provides rules, regulations, standards, and benchmarks to the job of the operating core, support provides exactly that. That is called support to the work of the operating core. But they are not members of the operating core, and support can function at any level. So at the lowest level, it will have more routine activities, and at the highest level, it will have very, very specialized activities. So let's take, I'll give you many examples here. But let us first take the example of the university. Okay. Now, university में lower level support में आपको क्या मिलेगा? You will see dispatch, you will see cafeteria. All of these are there. These are very important services, but they all form a part of the support. Mid-level support in the university क्या होगा? Very important again, ICT and the library services. Highest level of support in the university are PR, are legal, accounting and audit. They would form the highest level. So not directly doing the day-to-day work of the organization, but providing support to the work of the operating core. That is the meaning of support. So like a question was asked in the previous class, where will you put R&D? Is R&D a part of the operating core? Answer is no. R&D is not responsible for day-to-day activities of the organization. R&D is responsible for providing support to the work of the operating core. So R&D is one of the most specialized activities of the organization at the highest level of support, highest. So for example, if I'm looking at a pharmaceutical company like Pfizer, like Merck, like Sanofi, any of these big companies, okay? So all of them have multiple R&D teams, okay? Multiple, not one, multiple R&D teams which are working with thousand-fold labs, okay? Where will you put them? Will you put them in the operating core or will you put them in support? They're not a part of the operating core. They may be very important, but they are not a part of the operating core. They don't do regular day-to-day activities of the organization. Crudely put, their work is to develop new drugs, look at the chance of new possibilities in the market. Okay. Supposing I'm a manufacturing company and I have something called as a new product development team. उस new product development team को तुम operating core में डाल दोगे? Are they doing the day-to-day activities of the organization? Once again, part of support. Did you understand what I'm trying to say? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now, if I'm taking all of these five parts together and I look at how they look, okay, they look like this. This is a picture from your book only. So that is what I thought I'll put on this slide. So you can see this is the main part of the organization, the apex, the middle line, and the operating core. And on both ends, you have the ancillary part, one which sets standards, one which provides support services. So this is how you integrate all the five parts together. Okay. Now, question is, why is your understanding of these five parts very, very important and critical to organization design? So typically, before we go to design, you will understand that there will be five generic designs that you read. Okay. Mintzberg has proposed five generic designs under which every organization can be classified. Okay. So you can have a startup company also, you can have a big company also, manufacturing, service, जो भी आप चाहोगे उसी पांच डिजाइन्स में आप क्लासिफाई करोगे, right? But what you are going to do, how will you analyze design? You analyze design by using 8 dimensions. What are those 8 dimensions? The first 3 of them are structure, complexity, formalization, and centralization. The remaining 5 are these 5: strategic apex, middle line, core, techno, and support. And you will also find a very interesting thing that in each design option that we go through, you will find that in every design option, a part of the organization becomes the most important. So you may have design option 1, where strategic apex is the most important part of the organization. You may have design option 2, where the operating core becomes the most important part. And also, Mintzberg has provided reasons that why the parts of the organization keep changing in different design options. Okay, so that is why the understanding of these 5 parts is very, very critical and crucial for you in deciding organization design. Okay, any doubts up till now? Anything? अरे भाई अपना मुंह चेहरा सब बंद करके मत बैठो. Yeah, please tell me. Anything that you want to ask? Okay. So now we have some time. So let's start with the first design option. And here I want everybody's camera to be on. Okay. And if you make mistakes, which the way in which most of you have written in your mid semesters, I don't know what to tell you. After doing everything, the only thing left for us is to come and write your papers. Okay. So, jitna jaldi ho sake, you should actually come to the university so that your spoon feeding is going to be over. Now, please switch on your videos. Yeah, a lot of spoon feeding is happening now. Recordings, notes, running notes, और ये Moodle business तो is online business यार. कुछ भी लिख रहे हो आप लोग, and you are filling in your pages and writing in such shoddy handwriting and taking, God knows, somebody has posted a video also. I don't know why that guy had posted a video of his answer. Thank God he didn't post the video of his, search on the internet. वो तो और भयंकर होता. मैंने पीडीएफ की जगह वीडियो भेज दिया. वंडरफुल. So So कुछ भी हो सकता है. You know, there's a tagline, no, in one of those TV shows, कुछ भी हो सकता है. So that is what is happening now. So now please concentrate and show your beautiful faces on your camera so that I can ask you questions. Okay. Now let's look at the first one. And what is the first design called? It's called the simple structure. Okay. Remember that. So you will have 5 different names also starting from now. So what I've done is there are many people who have said that, Madam, will we have demos of questions which will come on organization design in the end semester? ये भी चाहिए उनको. ठीक है? Thank God they didn't ask for sample answers. I have sample questions. Okay. So we will do one design, we will go through the demo, we will see the analysis, and then we'll move on. Okay. So now let's do this. By the way, you will not find this kind of a table in any of your books. So please be concentrated on this slide because this I have done typically for the class so that it simplifies everything. Now, what is the meaning of the simple structure? Now, simple structure is connected with the life cycle of the organization. What is the meaning of connected with the life cycle? Now, when the organization is in the growth stage, that means it is growing. It's an expanding organization. It is very often an organization that has the simple structure. Okay. So when we looking at the design options and the structural, dimensions. So what I've done is I've broken this table into 2 parts. One is the structural dimensions. One is the design dimensions. Okay. So before we look at the structural dimensions, this is how it looks like in effect. Okay. It's a very small organization, right? So it's, basically, if you look at the design may, please remember this. Out of the 5 parts, only 2 parts of the organization are present in the simple structure. The first is the apex and the second is the core. यही दोनों parts है. It is a very, very lean organization, very, very small organization, and it's a very fluid organization, small unit, basically. Now let's understand the structural dimensions. Yeah, let's go to the first. It's and like I told you that in design, the first thing that you will look at is the size. Size. Okay. Because size is very important. Now look at and why size is important. Let me go to complexity. What have I written? Complexity is low as the structure is not elaborated. What is the meaning of structure is not elaborated? The small organization,
small.
yeah, the size is small. So you don't really have too much of elaboration. So complexity is low. Now, what is the next? Formalization. Formalization is also low. Why? Because it is a small and nascent organization. What is the meaning of this word nascent? Nascent is new. Okay. So there's nothing much to formalize. Formalization tabhi hoga when there is security in the market. So abhi, you're just exploring opportunities. Okay. So it's a small organization. Okay. It's a new organization. So you don't have too much of formalization. So complexity is low, formalization is low. But interesting part is centralization is high. Why? Centralization is high because this is an organization completely dictated by the founder. See, if let us say, I'm looking at my screen and I have Aliva, Sunnit, Sharda, and Avik. Okay. Now let us say these 4 guys tomorrow decide to start a company, start a startup. Okay. And they will, secure the capital. They have a blueprint and they start it. Okay. So in the initial days of the organization, they would want to keep the balance of power in their hands. That is how it happens in all these startups because the entire guide is coming from the people who are founding the organization. So that's the reason why centralization remains high. And there are anyways not many people in the organization, so it can work. Okay. But the general structural classification is organic. Okay. So how will you classify the simple structure? Simple structure is not mechanistic. It's very flexible and it's organic. Why? Because the size of the organization is small. Now come down to design. Design में क्या दिख रहा है आपको? See, techno is not applicable. Support is not applicable. That means these two are already not there. Techno is not applicable. And how are we able to connect this? With formalization. The extent of formalization in the company already is nil to low. Okay, nil to low, not even between low to moderate. It is nil to low. तो उसकी जरूरत ही नहीं है. सपोर्ट की जरूरत इसलिए नहीं है because most of the support activities in small companies are outsourced. Okay, they are not insourced. To keep the costs down, they outsource these support activities. So what do you in effect have? You don't have the middle line because it's a small organization. There is no need to create the third layer. So it's the strategic capex and the operating core that you are dealing with. Only two parts of the organization you have. Now come to the most important part of the organization. In the simple structure, the most important part of the organization is the strategic capex. The people who are founding this organization or the founder leaders of the organization. So that is how we continue with the simple structure. Now forget about this prime coordination. This is what is important. So what do you have? What kind of a organization is this? This is a growing company, very, very small unit. It has only two parts to it. One is apex, the other is core. Complexity low, formalization low, and centralization high. Okay. So what is the most important part of the organization? It is the strategic apex. And the organization looks like this, very, very lean and trim and extremely fluid. Okay. Now, let's go through a demo. Okay.
Ma'am, the example which you gave, that four of us started the business. Then in that out of four of us, who will be the operating core and who will be the strategic apex, ma'am? Because
No,
I think
all the
of
four
them.
of you, no, all the four of you will be members of the strategic apex because all of you are founder leaders of your organization, right? So supposing you are very much like a Infosys. Infosys started that way, no? मैंने वो जो बोलते हैं ना सारे बड़े बड़े organizations किसी के फ्लैट में या किसी के गराज में चालू होते हैं and right, four of them who came together to start this beautiful organization that you have today, right? So they are all members of the apex and you have collected a group of 10 to 12 people who again would form the members of the operating core. तो क्या है इस organization में? Only two parts. And because it's a small organization, flexibility is inbuilt. Organizational flexibility कहाँ पे reduce होता है? जब the organization keeps expanding. When the organization becomes bulky, then naturally flexibility भी कम होता है. So in organization theory, you will always find that there is a lot of comparison of organizations to living beings. That is how we understand them. When you're looking at big organizations, large organizations, they are called as elephants. Okay. Whereas when you are looking at very small organizations, they are called as deers. Okay. ठीक है. So flexibility wise, elephant is not very flexible. है ना, वो अपने ही पेस पे काम करेगा. उसको तुम भगाओगे तो मैंने ऐसे नहीं है कि वो तुरंत भाग जाएगा. But the deer is very flexible. It all depends on size. And that is the coordination that you have with a small vis-a-vis a large-sized organization, right? So simple structure is meant for small organizations. Always remember that. That means organization size will be very, very less. Okay. So now let's see a demo. And that's the first thing you guys are going to analyze. जब भी आपको केस मिलेगा डिजाइन पे, ये मुझे बोलने की जरूरत नहीं है. याद रखिए आप लोग, straight away latch on to size. Let us see whether you can do that or not here. Case one, take a look at case one. It will be easy here. Why? Because we are doing it and then looking at this, huh? But in the exam, it can be anything. Okay? ये देखो. So this caselet is 50 to 100 words, 150 words maximum. तो उतना ही आएगा. In the exam भी वही होगा. 300 words के अंदर ही caselet होगा. Okay?
Simple structure.
Yeah. So we have understood that it is an example of a simple structure. ठीक है? Now, what did I say? What is the first thing you will find out? The size,
Size.
which is 14. Okay, which is a very small organization. So what should that tell you about complexity? Complexity cannot be high, na? एक
Is
एक
low
एक
complexity.
it is low complexity for a single person. You cannot be creating a department, so it is low complexity. Now, if you look at the rest of the explanation, where I'm reading it out, and that should tell you how to analyze. The work is highly customized, and no two decorations are alike until the client specifically asks for it. Now, what does that tell you about formalization? Formalization is low because the extent of customization is very high. Every decoration that they do is completely client bound, client specific, and no two decorations are the same. So formalization is very low. Okay. Now, if you look at the question of centralization, then how are you going to treat centralization? Let's look at this. They have gradually employed nearly 14 people in total, people specialized with a degree in fine arts or interior decoration to manage both these portfolios. Very often they pitch on sales meetings, client presentations, and the actual process of hiring new people also. So they are basically managing the entire process of the company. So centralization is remaining high, right? So this is how you're taking care of structure. Now come to design. Design में मैंने क्या कहा था? Simple structure meaning you have apex and you have core. Okay, so apex तो पता ही चल गया है आपको that this is managed by two people, right? Two friends on completion of their MBA degree. Now look at this. With the growth of business, they now share a secretary and have employed two receptionists. They have a reliable tie-up with local artisans, carpenters, plumbers, and textile factories in order to perform their day-to-day operations. So which should tell you that their support arm is completely outsourced through contractual tie-ups. Okay? ये जो local artisans, carpenters, plumbers वो उनके खुद के नहीं हैं. They are all outsourced or hired from outside for a specific period of time and for a specific job. Okay, clear? Everybody is understanding how to make the analysis possible? Yes or no?
Ma'am, so they have
Arjun?
support staff.
They don't have support. They don't have support. That is what I'm saying. That the fifth part of the organization in a simple structure, Sharda, does not exist. Simple structure में बस दो ही parts होते हैं. क्या है वो दो part? One is apex and the other is operating core. You have no technostructure, you have no middle line, and you have no support. You have no technostructure. Why? Because the extent of formalization is less. You have no middle line. Why? Because it's a small organization. यार 14 लोगों के लिए middle line कौन create करेगा? Okay. Then look at the support. सपोर्ट को वो हमेशा बाहर से आउटसोर्स करते हैं फॉर द रीजन दैट दे वुड वांट टू कीप देयर कॉस्ट्स ऑन अ shoestring down. If they keep on having internal departments, then the costs will be very high and the possibilities of getting revenue will be less. ठीक है? Anirban, yes,
Ma'am,
please, please.
ma'am, if we see the complexity, you told that the complexity should be low because the number of people working in the organizations are less, about 14. But then, ma'am, if we see from the other aspect of a social specialization, then from that,
Complexity, I understand. Then in that
should be
case, is complexity high? Yeah, in very often what happens is, see, ये जो मैंने problem तुम्हारा होगा, Anirban, I'm giving a very shoddy answer, but I think I'll stick to the answer right now for the simple reason that, when I come to the last design option, that is advocacy, you will find this difference. ठीक है? यहाँ पे एक और चीज भी आपको देखने को मिलेगा that you don't have complexity which is low, you don't have formalization, but you have a high degree of centralization. और जहां पे एक चीज याद रखो, जहां पे centralization is high, the focus on social specialization is less. समझे कि नहीं? जहां पे social specialization is high, it has to be decentralized. There is no other way out. Did you get it, Anirban?
yes, ma'am.
So, when you are asking this question, which is a very vital, valid question, and which also shows that you remember what I've told you in the past, I would want you to wait till I go to the last design option, that is advocacy. You will find this difference, though, and you can understand that why this is called simple and why that is called advocacy. Are you getting me? Is that all right?
Yes, ma'am.
हमेशा याद रखो that the three structural dimensions are interconnected. They never happen in isolation. Okay. So whenever you are looking at higher degrees of centralization with a small organization, you should immediately connect that yes, it's simple. Okay. But jahan pe aapko, you will see the reverse, no? That means you have a small organization, but very specialized, but with decentralization. And that is not going to be simple structure anymore. That will be advocacy. I will show you. Uska bhi ek example dungi so that you get clear. But in this demo, are you able to understand how to analyze, how to write in the exam? You are not going to write more than 2 pages, okay? You're not going to write more than that. But whatever you write will have to be right. Because if you give me a wrong design option here, then I cannot give you any marks. Take it. So please keep that in mind. And if you have any doubts, I would share all of this with you. तो आपके पास अगर कोई doubts है, तो please come prepared with that in the next class when we are taking up all the other remaining 4 design options. तो मैंने क्या कहा है? That 5 generic designs ऐसे हैं जिसमें कि any organization of the world can be categorized. You don't need a 6th design, but we will be doing a 6th design, and that is matrix, which is a hybrid of 2 designs. Okay, so we'll be looking at all of that. Now, let us start off with the case first, and then we'll take the quiz. Group 1, fast. Just a minute.